Okay. Now, what I was he was talking about earlier was the connection between spirit and science, and you and Richard have done a lot of work that showed that the alignment of planets and the poles on their axes and at 19.5 degrees in conjunction with 33 degrees. Now, I'm not explaining it very well. You can do a lot better than I'm doing explaining it. Has a lot to do with this here connection that you think you've made, right?
Right. I guess, it's Richard's theory. It's called hyperdimensional physics. And Richard and Errol Torren actually developed the idea initially back in the late 80s with a paper called The Message of Cydonia, which was, of course, derived from the mathematics that they decoded from the monuments of Mars, these ruins, apparent ruins on the surface of Mars. And the term hyperdimensional comes from the term hyperspace, and hyperspace was coined back in the 1800s. I forget the name of the physicist off the top of my head, but it simply means higher dimensions. So, the basic concept is that all of the energy in this universe comes from outside. It comes from somewhere else. Now, in traditional physics, they believe that this is a closed system, that when the Big Bang happened, that was all the energy that ever was or ever could be in this universe, and that was all we would ever get, and it could not be created or destroyed. It could only change form, and you could never get more energy out than you put into the system because the system is closed. What the hyperdimensional model is, and I had the privilege of writing a lot of this up in Chapter 2 of Dark Mission, our first book, or book together. What it says is the system is not closed, and the mathematics pretty much from the very beginning showed that this was the case, but because of some historical issues that happened, physics got sidetracked in the 1800s, right at the very beginning. And the way to unlock all this energy is really simply by spinning stuff, by rotating something in a certain way at a certain velocity, certain frequencies, and you begin to draw in more energy from somewhere else. And of course, the question then becomes, what's the somewhere else? And really there's no other place except a fourth or a fifth or a sixth or all the way up to a 26th spatial dimension. And, again, physics and science pretty much, to me, it's so blatantly obvious that this is the easy explanation for everything that we see in the known universe, that it continues to stun me that, physicists, Michio Kaku and some of these other guys, they still really can't quite go there. And, I don't know, I guess they're just really locked into their paradigms. But,
well,
I think it's the answer.
I think Michio Kaku is probably going a little bit further out on a limb than most of his peers are going, at least. He hasn't gone.
I guess I would acknowledge that to some extent, but, again, these guys never drift too far away from their funding. So, I don't think that we're really, it's very simple. They come up with all these different, catchphrases for it. And why don't we simply say it's higher dimensions? Because once you put the scalar component, the higher dimensional component, into all the different physics, mathematics, it all just comes out perfect. And yet there's just this
they're looking for a unified field theory, and they can't get it because they won't include all the parts.
Exactly. They will never, ever find it. There will never be unified field theory until we accept the fact that, there are higher spatial dimensions, and we put those into the equations. You go back to John Quirk Maxwell's original electromagnetic equations, where he used a higher dimensional component of numbers called quaternions, which were actually very special four-space kind of numbers, and that unified everything. But that was all stripped out by a man named Oliver Heaviside before it was put into the textbooks, essentially. And now the equations that are taught to students, in college are called Maxwell's equations. They're in fact Oliver Heaviside's equations, and they're not the same thing. And that from that moment on, our study of physics was crippled. That's why none of the physical models, whether it's quantum mechanics, particle physics, relativity, none of them make any sense. Even Newton is a joke when you start looking at experiments. It just doesn't, none of these things really work, and they never will.
That was one of the things that I thought about when I saw your video over there, was Newton and gravity. because I've known for a long time that you had to have the Earth spin somehow involved with the gravity that holds us to the planet. I mean, just from going to Astroworld and getting in their barrel full of monkeys where you get up against the wall, they spin the barrel, they drop the floor, and you stick to the wall because you're spinning. If they stop spinning, you'll drop. It kind of gives me a clue.
It's really funny. If you actually go to Wikipedia and you look at some of these things, you'll find that they actually call centrifugal force a, quote, fictitious force. That's what it's actually called in physics because they can't account for it. In other words, there's no real way to get there from here. Why would something spinning actually create a centrifugal force which would pin you to the wall? It's really absurd. So all Newton's laws of motion are all wrong. Einstein's relativity is wrong. Quantum mechanics, quantum physics is a joke. Whenever I hear the word quantum come out of somebody's mouth, my eyes just roll up in my head. And let me just tell you, anybody who's listening, if somebody talks about quantum time or quantum reality or quantum spirituality, okay, you know what that means? What that means is they're trying to sound really smart and they have no clue what the hell they're talking about because quantum physics is a complete joke when you get down into it. I mean, it works great as long as you don't include gravity in the equations, then it all falls apart. So do we live in a universe with no gravity? I mean, last time I checked, there's gravity.
Do you think there's some interreaction with what they consider dark matter that has an interplay play with the spinning motion that helps create gravity?
No, I don't think dark matter exists. I mean, Richard actually disagrees with me a little bit on this one, I think, but I don't think dark matter exists. Again, you go into dark matter and you simply go to Wikipedia, which is not the greatest source in the world because it's very inaccurate frequently, especially without Richard. But, you get in there and, it talks about how, in a closed system, again, those words, meaning that there's no energy coming outside of the universe, there's only the energy that's in the universe now is all there ever will be, that there simply isn't enough mass to account for the gravity that's holding everything together, including the stars, the planets, the stars, the galaxies, and the superclusters of galaxies. 70% of it is missing. So rather than simply going to the idea that, well, maybe there's something else besides mass that creates gravity, like, I don't know, Royce, spin, or maybe there's something coming from a higher dimension. In other words, the system is not closed, that somehow is a force that creates gravity. What do they do instead? They conclude that, 70% of the matter in the universe is just invisible. We can't see it. We can't detect it. It's just invisible. Yeah, that's it. That's the answer. I mean, it's absurd. And for supposedly, this just proves to me one thing, which is that I've always believed since I was a very young man, okay, education and intelligence are two completely different things.
Actually, I would tend to agree with you because you got academics and you got mental.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, I've worked with people in TV rental that were college grads that had absolutely zero common horse sense.
Yeah, and I mean, just the idea that there's all this missing dark matter. No, it's not missing. It's just either A, it's existing in parallel dimensions, which is possibly what's happening, or higher dimensions, which is holding the universe together from that perspective, or it's simply that the force itself is coming from outside the system. And again, they will try to pound square pegs in the round holes and to make come up with some experiment that will, quote, prove dark matter, but it'll never happen. It's ridiculous, really, when you get into it.
Well, it kind of makes me wonder exactly what the Apostle Paul knew when he wrote in Hebrews that by faith we understand the things that are made are created by the things that are seen are made by the things that are not seen.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Meaning simply from somewhere else, from high above us and from other place. So. Or
from we would consider a spiritual plane.
Yeah. Well, let's call it heaven. That's the easiest thing to do. Is just call it the next step up would be heaven. It's heaven compared to this, right?
Which again, if you mix science and religion, or science and spirituality, because religion's way off base. No offense, man, I'm a big believer in God, but I'm not so big on church.
Depends on
you can get the spiritual principle involved. This is what I think the old alchemists of old were doing.
Exactly.
And I mean, they even got some high spin gold out there now. The ORMS project that Lawrence Gardner talks about. Are you any chance familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with it, no.
Well, you can get a video of it on Google if you want to look into it. But he's actually found out that white powder gold, or high spin gold as he calls it, you might Google ORMS project also, and Lawrence Gardner's name to find it, or I might send you the links in the email or something. But at any rate, he's finding out that this here stuff, that when you heat it, it gets lighter, and it can actually disappear, or at least appear to disappear, like it goes into another dimension. And I know he calls it high spin for a reason. I'd have to go back and rewatch the video, but I think it's somehow connected to what you're doing.
Well, yeah, it's probably pretty simple. But probably what's going on is that by heating the gold, he's basically exciting the molecules and exciting the atoms inside. The electrons start spinning faster. Everything is rotating. If we were not in motion constantly and rotating, I believe we would not be pulling any life energy from beyond. I think that's what keeps us alive, is the constantly spinning, rotating electrons and atoms in our bodies. But that's probably what's going on, is that by heating it, he's actually, getting things to spin a bit faster. And as we do, you can negate the effects of gravity. I mean, there's actually a great experiment. I'm going to talk about this in my second book, which is called The Choice, which is going to be coming out in October from New Page Books. And we're going to talk about an experiment that Dr. Brian De Palma did in the 1970s. And again, Richard was the first guy to bring this to the public. And basically what he did is he took two little pinballs, from the old pinball machines, and he stuck them in a test rig, and he spun one of them at about 27,000 RPM, and one of them he didn't spin it at all, and he launched them out with equal force. And the ball that was spinning rose higher, it rose faster, and it fell faster and went farther than the one that was not spinning. And that basically just negates Newton right there. I mean, at that point, Newton's, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, goes right out the window, because when you spin stuff, you have different laws of physics, and you negate gravity. And, again, I could completely believe the gold story. I'd like to see the experiment and see how it was done, but, it makes complete sense to me that the heating would start an internal reaction to some extent on the gold. And, maybe this is why gold is so valuable, because maybe it's more sensitive to being vibrated at a higher frequency and having this sort of, anti-gravity effect take place.
Well, what I think is interesting about it is a couple of things, actually. One of them being that it gets heavier again when you pull it off the fire and it cools down, which you would expect. Mm-hmm. And the other one is its connection to spirituality, because according to him, the ancient Sumerian, Egyptian pharaohs were ingesting this stuff. It was called fire of the gods. They were preparing it in a certain way and ingesting it, and it was supposed to raise their spiritual awareness. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how that works.
Yeah, well, that would make complete sense to me, because basically you're tuning in to a faster, higher level frequency, a faster vibration, a higher plane, and you're going to get, it's like opening a wider connection, a bigger antenna to, the signals that you're getting from high above. One of the things that I'm going to go over in The Choice that's really important is to talk about how, electromagnetic waves, there's plenty of experiments where they've been affected by the positions of the planets. In other words, these spinning, rotating, constantly moving large bodies in the solar system, as they move around and they create different geometries relative to the Earth in their orbits, the quality of radio waves is affected. And that is, again, impossible in any modern physics model, and yet it does happen. And it's, in essence, Royce, what it proves is that we have souls. It proves that we have higher selves, because your thoughts, every thought in your mind is nothing more than an electromagnetic pulse. It's a pulse of electromagnetic energy. And if electromagnetic waves can be affected, radio waves can be affected by the movements of the planets, then so can and will your consciousness be affected. And that means, among other things, that astrology is actually real, that the positions of the planets did have an effect on your personality when you were born, and probably that you incarnated at a very specific time and place for a very specific reason. So there's all sorts of really, really deep implications for these kinds of experiments. But unfortunately, nobody seems to really be talking about what they are.
Yeah, and I'd have to wonder about why there's such a lack of interest in it.
Well, I think that they're pretty good at distracting us. There's a lot of people like to, you spend a lot of time watching television. I honestly, Bryce, I don't think I've turned my TV on since the Super Bowl. I actually watched most of that at a bar here locally. So that would be, early February. And, my life is so full right now. Everything seems to really be flowing well. And, the last thing I want to do is distract myself with a bunch of nonsense on TV.
I can see where you're coming from on that because I'm kind of like you in that respect. Aside from going back there about roughly 2 hours a night with my wife and watching your old sitcoms, Jeffersons and stuff, to spend time with her, I don't rarely ever watch TV. But I spend most of my time working on the show, doing research work, studying work that people like you and Richard and Lawrence and Zachariah and, some of the other people have done, and trying to learn about our past because I think our present lies in our past.
I agree with you on that 100%. And the thing is, once you're freed from the prison of the entertainment box, your mind starts to free up. And your soul starts to activate, and you start to think about things. And I think the worst thing that could really happen, to the Matrix would be for people to start waking up to that, in that way. But the reality is, the calendar, the mind calendar, the physics say that it's going to happen anyway, no matter how good TV is. People are going to start to wake up and say to themselves, "Gosh, there's got to be, more to life than this."
Well, I got to tell you, Mike, I kind of tend to agree with you and Richard in as much, actually about a lot of things. But one of the things is it seems to me like people in NASA and people even in the White House actually, if you look at some of the symbolism around Capitol Hill, for example, seem to know something about this research work that you and Richard have been doing and probably have known for some time through ancient scripture through no other means.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that Richard and I talked about years ago, I don't know if he ever talked about it publicly, but one of the really interesting things we talked about was that the two lowest cancer rate cities in the United States for forever, I think, have been Honolulu, Hawaii, and Washington, D.C. So Honolulu, Hawaii is at 19.5 degrees, which is, according to the tetrahedral geometry, where the energy upwelling from the higher dimensional, realms is going to manifest itself on the Earth. So it's the place where the spirit energy comes out of the Earth, and that's why you've got this constantly erupting, Mauna Kea volcano there, which is just constantly bulging up. And the other place, Washington, D.C., is a place where you have all of this specifically geometrically aligned monumental architecture, which was, designed by a Freemason who I'm sure understood the spiritual, the aspects of how to channel the spiritual energy in the right way and the life energy in the right way through the architecture. So, again, that would be something that would fit with what you just said.
Right. And I had Tom Horn on my show not long ago, and he was telling me that one of the markers toward the Mayan end of time, that they had it separated by Katuns. And I think he said it was the 13th Katun was occurred in 1776, which is when we was founded. And it also just happens to be the same date that Jesuit priests, which is an arm of the Catholic, the Vatican, founded the Illuminati. And I'm pretty sure there's a connection in that as well.
Yeah, I guess. The thing about the secret societies is the Illuminati, I don't know. I've heard about them. I've never been able to put my finger on them as a real existing society. I mean, maybe it does exist, but to me, it's like I'm more, comfortable with the ones that But I can say, okay, yeah, they exist. Here's their meetings. There's Masonic lodges all over the place. The other ones like the Illuminati, I don't know. They could exist, but I really don't know if they do and to what extent they do. So yeah, that's just sort of a sidelight thing. But again, yeah, if you look at the work of sort of people like Carl Kalman, who's written a couple books on the Mayan calendar, he's been able to predict economic upturns and down cycles pretty much based on the calendar and how he views the calendar as a series of waves of ups and downs. And right now, as we talked about earlier when nobody could hear us, we're in what's called the sixth night of the galactic underworld of the Mayan calendar, and things are very quiet and kind of calm right now. Like at night, the barnyard is quiet. And I think very soon things are going to start to ramp up again energetically for the seventh day, which is the last phase of this particular underworld. And then we move into the very final phase of the calendar, at least according to his model, which ends in 2012.
Now, I know there's been a lot of controversy on this. You got one camp that is, they're kind of like the people that read the apocalypse that say that the end of the world's coming. The other people are saying, well, no, this ain't the end of the world. This is the end of an age. That it starts again after this age ends, and it's really more about shifting into a higher level of consciousness and the Earth moving up a level in dimension. Would your research kind of indicate that by any chance?
Well, again, this is what the next book is going to be all about. I'm calling it The Choice because it really is that we're all faced with a choice. And the reality is, in my opinion, what's going to happen is going to be dictated by what we, as a species, what we choose. And we can have it either way, because the reality is that our energy, our spiritual energy, is far greater than this pulse of energy that's going to come from the center of the galaxy. And it's far more powerful than all the nuclear weapons on this planet put together. And it's far more powerful than all those things combined, and yet we aren't really using it. And so what I think is going to happen is that people are going to start to wake up, and the question is that at some point we're going to have to decide what kind of world we want to live in. And I think that's the question that we're going to face at the end of this age: is what's our world going to be? And when I think when all this energy gets here, and it sort of washes over the earth, I think if we're oriented towards the selfish and the negative and the material, then I think it's not going to be a very good experience. But I think if we're oriented towards the selfless and the spiritual and, the giving and the peaceful way of life, then I think that we will transition into something really, really special and really incredibly beautiful. So, again, I'm going to talk about this in The Choice, which is, again, new page books coming out in October. I'm going to talk about those options and how you get from one place to the other. And, it's interesting because I'm going to talk about this from other venues soon, but William Henry, who was a researcher, and John Maker Jenkins talk about that there's one interpretation of some Mayan glyphs and monuments that basically says that what the Mayans believe is that Quetzalcoatl, the great god Quetzalcoatl, or Kukulkan, I forget which one is Mayan, is riding at the end of a serpent rope that's coming from the center of the galaxy. And a serpent rope is sort of a code name for what you would call a torsion beam or a torsion field. It's something that Einstein actually modeled a little bit, and I think it's really the secret behind the hyperdimensional physics and the physics of this universe. At any rate, he's riding at the end of the serpent rope, and we're going to get hit by this burst of energy in December of 2012 or right around there, and that he is then going to pass judgment on the Earth. And the problem is, of course, when people hear that, they assume it's judgment. You're good, you're bad, you're going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell, that kind of thing. And what it's really, I think what the judgment is that he's going to judge what our intent is as a planet. And remember, there's other people like the Aetherius Society that believe that the planet, everything in it, including the crystals and the rocks, everything, is just as alive as we are. And so what they're going to basically, what Quetzalcoatl is going to ask us is, what do we intend? And if we're into fear and scarcity and war and conflict, again, things might go so well, but if we're all singing Kumbaya and holding hands, it'll go a lot better. So it's not exactly that bad. But, again, I think that this is what the lesson of the calendar is. And even if, nothing happens and nothing really changes, I think that will mean that enough people got, into the spirit, got themselves connected to God or the universe or Great Spirit or whatever you want to call it, and we made a difference. And that's really what I feel in my life compelled to be doing for the next few years. And then once we get through that phase, going out and trying to make the world into something that I want it to be. So I agree with both of those scenarios, I guess.
Yeah, and I know that even Jesus in the Bible talked about a separating of the wheat and the chaff at the end of time, and there was an indication there would be a certain group that would, in other words, be opting for love and opting for the Spirit and holding hands, singing Kumbaya, like you said, or the other group that is like, well, let's just blow everybody away that doesn't want to do everything our way, and I guess they would be the chaff.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There's other perspectives. There's a few interesting guys. I think a guy named Daryl Anka who channels a guy named Bashar. Normally, I wouldn't take this kind of thing too seriously, but when I start hearing things out of the mouths of some of these guys that kind of add up to stuff that I already know from a certain amount of science and factual research, then what I begin to think is that there might be something to it. And anyway, he talks about how the reality is there's different timelines. And we're all obviously all in the timeline that survives because we've survived to this point. We're still here. And what's going to happen is that the people that choose to stay behind in the lower realms, the lower vibration, the lower, the more selfish, materialistic behaviors, that they may end up getting left behind, and that their Earth may have the apocalyptic kind of really bad day. And that those of us that choose to be in a higher place and choose a better world for ourselves, that our Earth may simply go on in a really beautiful way. So again, it's simply a question of which one of those is true and which side are you going to be on? I mean, which choice are you going to make? It comes down to two questions. These are the two questions that I'm going to try to answer in the choice, which is, who are you really? And what do you want, really? And I think that that's what people are going to really need to be asking themselves over the next few years, and well beyond 2012. What do I really want, and who am I really trying to be? And then once you decide that, I think you will get, in droves, what you asked for. So. It's interesting because it's kind of like The Secret. The Secret was really great if all you wanted was, a big house, a fast car, and a hot girlfriend. But if you really want to live in a world where, people get along and there's a lot of love and everything is positive and you live in a more natural state, kind of like, Pandora in Avatar. If you want to live in that kind of a space, a beautiful space, then you have to look beyond simply asking for material things, and you have to ask for some spiritual guidance, and you have to ask for the world to be protected. It's fascinating. A bunch of folks, different spiritual groups, when there was the earthquake about a month ago, and there was supposed to be this big tsunami coming, and everybody was so worried. And a lot of these spiritual groups said, okay, everybody get together and focus and pray and try to minimize the tsunami so it's not a big deal. And nothing happened. And the geologists were really pretty shocked by that. And I'm beginning to think that I wonder if that was really an incident where, a few people's thoughts and energy, maybe just a few million out of this planet of 7 billion people, were able to really reduce that effect. I mean, the physics experiments actually will back those ideas up. So it sounds pretty new agey and airy-fairy, but one of the things I hope to do in my new book is to actually show that there are plenty of experiments that prove out that this kind of thing is possible, that we can change reality with simply our thoughts and our feelings and our desires.
Yeah, once you begin to understand the actual power of thought, and you begin to realize what you actually have done in your own lifetime, naturally, without even being aware of it. But before we go too much further, I wanted to mention for the listeners your website, www.mikebara.com.
Yeah, that's a little.
That's
kind of a test run right now. It's there, but it's not really fully developed yet. It really is getting. People can go there and you can find links to the books I have out now, Dark Mission and stuff, and some videos. But really, I prefer if people just go to Facebook. If you're on Facebook and search me with Mike Bara, B-A-R-A. That's where I'm most active right now. And I have a blog called the Lightbringer blog, which is generally linked up to my Facebook page. But that's where things are. I'm trying to write as much as I can. I got a very busy life. I've got many projects going right now. So I appreciate you mentioning that. But MikeBara.com is not quite ready for showtime yet.
Okay. I know. I saw you had a film production company called Lightbringer or Lightbearer, was it?
Yeah, it's Lightbringer, yeah.
So
Lightbringer Productions Incorporated, yes.
You plan to develop some films on the kind of topics that you're interested in for future reference?
Well, we are making, I'm working on some documentaries with a few people like Sean David Morton about 2012 and so forth. And that is one of the things. That's actually not going to be through Lightbringer. But yeah, I'm intended to be a production company. We are going to be shooting, it looks like a feature film in May, which is got nothing to do with any of this stuff. It's kind of a comedy idea that I came up with, and some people here in LA wanted to make it. So I liked the script, and they wanted to make it. So we're going to go shoot that in May. And it's also there's a novel that I have called Lightbringer. And I've got an agent for it back in New York at Trident Media Group, and it's going to go out to publishers here real soon. And hopefully, I'm confident it's going to get published. So that's kind of where the name comes from. And so I'm going to develop that novel also into a spec screenplay, and we'll see what kind of funding we can pull together for that. So that's why I've got Lightbringer Productions. It's not much yet, but we're working on this first film, and I just spent a bunch of time and energy and money today getting ready to shoot this little comedy movie that I came up with. So that's what it's all about.
It sounds like you've got a lot on your plate and you got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I do, and I'm really, life is, I'm really blessed with all these different incredibly fun, cool things that I get to do, and I just really enjoy spending time creating things. And so, yeah, I'm pretty busy, and I guess I think I'm only going to get busier from here on out.
Well, that very well could be as much as you're taking on. And plus you've got, I think, a conference either coming up or you just had one with Alien Event, didn't you?
Yeah, we just did the Alien Event thing here in LA. That was March 14th, and Dave Farman over there. Again, you can go to, you can search alienevents.com, I believe it is, on the web, and go to the Alien Events member site on Facebook. And Dave put some videos out. I did about an hour and a half lecture there. Some other people like Jason Martell was there and Michael Cremo, and it was a pretty good event. You can pick up DVDs of it if you didn't watch it streaming. I think he's going to stream it live in the next day or so. So I've done that one. I've got 2 MUFON lectures coming up in May. Also possibly another one on May 27th at another location that's not set yet. And yeah, I've got a whole bunch of things lined up. And I just try to get out and speak to people as often as I can and talk about these things because really, I believe what I'm talking about. So what I want to do is get as many people as I can focused on themselves internally, focused on connecting to spirit somehow, and, going out and asking God for what they want the planet to look like in 2 years and 5 years and 10 years. So
I like to call it seeking.
About it.
I like to call it seeking God within.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter how you do it. What matters is that you do it. And what matters more now, I think, is that you have an intent. You know, I mean, I go to this church. I go to a really neat church here once in a while, called the Agape Spiritual Center. I forget what it is, but it's just a guy named Michael Bernard Beckwith who was on Oprah. He was in The Secret and stuff, and he's a great guy. And it's a great place. But you know, I sit there and I think you can seat a couple thousand people in his main sanctuary there, and he has 3 services on Sundays. So all these people come in and they listen to him, and he's just, you know, he's just a rock star. And he gets up there and he just really talks to people about how to make their lives better and how to get connected. And then everybody leaves. And I think to myself, does anybody really do anything with that when they leave the church? And some people do, but, you know, what has to happen is that when we leave, it's not enough to just go to church and sit there and listen, or go to whatever it is that you do, that, you know, whether it's yoga or whether it's, you know, Mormon church or Catholic church, whatever. It's not enough to simply go there and listen and, like, do your time and then go back to watching football. What we have to do around 2012 and around this period of change is we have to start, first of all, deciding who we are, setting our intent, and then actively not only asking the universe or God for those things to be done and the world to be made into what we want it to be, but also to go out and to talk to other people about it. I'm not saying proselytize. I'm just saying that, you know, you're going to find as the physics accelerates in the next couple of years leading up to 2012, that if you are connected to this higher self, this higher plane, and you're interested in these things, you're going to find people just magnetically attracted to you. I've had people that I thought were some of the shallowest people that I could ever imagine that have suddenly been interested in talking about 2012 and physics and spirit and things that you just would never have thought. So it's almost as if, and it really is this case, the planet's movements are actually driving and ramping our spirit up. It's changing our consciousness to the point that more and more and more people are going to suddenly just wake up, realize there's something more than this materialistic, three-dimensional world. There's something a lot more than American Idol or you know, Hollywood.
Right.
And they're going to start asking people around them, what do you know about this? What do I do with this? You know, they're going to need to know something. So I think a lot of us that are already kind of in that space, our job is to be ready to give them suggestions to different things that they could do, philanthropic things or just different things that they could do to make the world a better place. God, I sound like a hippie. I can't believe it.
Well, yeah, I was thinking when you said what you did about the Bible talking about I will pour out my spirit in those days, and thinking about the age of Aquarius, because, you know, water has been equated with spirit. And, you know, it's like the age of Aquarius, pouring out of the spirit is coming in, is what you're describing.
Yeah. And being an Aquarian, it feels like my time. So I think it's time for all of us Aquarians to sort of breathe in and expand and, you know, step into the opportunity that's going to come, be placed right in front of us in the next few years.
Well, I was going to mention to you, if you'd keep me up to date on your events as you got them going on, which I usually get them on Facebook, whether I'm able to attend or not from way over here in Houston, Texas. I can sure enough, even if I can't attend, spread the word and let people know what you got going on.
I would appreciate that, Royce, and I will keep you posted on things. And, you know, right now it's mostly local. It's L.A., but when the choice comes out, when, you know, New Page Books has said they're going to get behind it with a pretty strong publicity campaign, so I'm going to try to look for different expos and shows and things to come around and speak at around the country because, again, I feel a sense of urgency because you could have this negative scenario if enough of us don't, you know, get with the program and start asking for the kind of world we want. So I'm really looking forward to getting out and speaking as many different places as I can. In Houston, I think there's a NASA facility there, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, there is.
I'd love to come to Houston and speak about all kinds of different things and how this is all connected.
Right here in my hometown. You were saying something a minute ago about I had thought of something, and I'd be doggone if I didn't lose that thought now, but I know that...
You just dropped it on the floor and you haven't found it yet. It's down there. Just look for it.
I like that. But let's see, where was I at now? I lost my place, too. I must be getting tired or something.
Here's later back there, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's only about 9 o'clock. It's not that doggone late. I usually watch TV till close to 11 with my wife. uh,
Right.
but I know that I'm really very much on a very similar path that you're on. Oh, and I know what I was going to mention. I'm in some 70 odd Yahoo groups, and I see it all day, every day, that there's plenty of people fear mongering and spreading hate and material like
Yep.
that. And
Yep.
if enough people don't get together and spread the opposite message, guess which one's going to get out the most?
Yeah, that's true. But the thing you have to remember is that, and this is actually the theme of this little comedy movie that we're going to make, is that love is actually so much more powerful than fear. I mean, you know, it's got to be 1,000 times more powerful than fear, because if you think about it, the truth is, how much time in a given day do you spend worrying about something, in fear of something? I mean, we're human beings. We worry about stuff all the time. And compare that to how much time do you spend feeling, you know, love or joy or meditating or getting close to God. It's minuscule. So the love has to be way stronger. Otherwise, this place would be way more messed up than it is. You know, 99% of us, or at least in the United States, we live a comfortable, pleasant life. You know, we have a really good time, and so doesn't, you know, the fear is there and it does exist and it needs to be countered. But remember that our side we got the bigger gun. We're much stronger because I think the universe is all ultimately based on love. At least that's what the Mayans said at the end of the calendar, and you know, in the Dresden Codex. That's basically the lesson of the calendar.
Well, for me, it's an easy concept. Love creates, fate destroys.
Yep.
Choose your path. I mean, you know.
Yep. Exactly. Make the choice. Which path are you going to take? Exactly.
And, you know, for me, it just makes more sense. Because I used to, my dad was a Pentecostal preacher. So and I live right here in the Bible Belt, and my whole family's Pentecostal or non-denominational. So you can imagine what my life was like growing up. But I noticed that, you know, a lot of teaching about going to heaven or going to hell. And I don't even think a lot about hell. And I mean, because my thought is, if you're doing what's right by God, hell doesn't apply to you, even if it really does exist.
No, and you know, and again, what would help be, I guess, really, you know, I think some of these ideas got distorted.
I agree.
By people that wanted to exploit them, and I think that the Mayan, you know, concept of the 9 underworlds is really closer to the reality, which is just that, okay, so if you know, if you're not ready to go to the higher level, you kind of stay in the lower level. And in essence, you're in an underworld or in a hell that's, you know, not as pleasant as the next place up that you could go. So, you know, the one thing I will say, though, about what you just said is that, you know, there's God in every teaching, you know, and I've had some friends, I've got friends that I've worked with that are Mormon. A lot of people don't like some of their ideas, but, you know, these are some of the nicest people I've ever been around. I had another good friend who's intellect I could not have respected more, and she was Catholic. And, you know, I mean, a lot of us don't like the Vatican, and I can understand that. But, you know, for her, she said, you know, any other church I go to, any other thing, I just don't feel it. But I walk into a Catholic church and I just feel it. And again, you know, we can't dismiss that. And you know, the Pentecostal church, it's probably great for some people. It probably does get them connected. It just wasn't right for you. So I try not to have any judgment. And again, I don't care whether you do yoga or chanting or, you know, some people like to do different mushrooms. Whatever gets you there, you know, whatever works for you is fine. I don't care how you get there as long as you're trying to get there. Because the more people that are connected to that God part of them, you know, the better the world's going to be. Again, I sound like a hippie. What happened to me, Royce?
I have no clue. But
I do.
You got to go back and look at that picture you showed to Richard Hoagland again.
Yeah.
On that video. Hey, listen, I was going to go on something else, but we only got 1 minute remaining, so I'm going to go ahead and cut short. I would love to have you come back in the future, though. And, Mike, I really enjoyed talking to you. I'd love to stay in touch.
Yeah, let's do that, and let's do it. You know, in October when the choice comes out, let's do it then, because then I'll be, you know, in full promotional mode for the new book, and it'll be about all the stuff we just talked about tonight, only in detail, and with all the paperwork to back it up.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds just great. And in the meantime, I'll make sure we get the word out about what you got going on, because I know several other people that's trying to get the same message out for the same purposes.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm trying to team up with as many of those people as I can. And one of the fortunate things about living in the Los Angeles area is that it's the throat chakra, it's the voice of the world. So there's everybody here who wants to communicate is here. And there are a lot of people that are really anxious to help you, and so I'm going to try to take advantage of that and, do my part to make the planet a better place, believe it or not. Again, I can't believe I'm saying that, but that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I think you're doing a good job of it, and I think you're on the right track. I really do. You're on a better track than a lot of people. I think at least a closer path than a lot of people are, bearing in mind that we're all at different levels. But like I said, we got 19 seconds, so real quick, I want to thank everybody who come to listen and participated in the show. I couldn't have my show without my listeners. Be talking to nobody. Wanted to thank you. Couldn't have a show without a guest either. So it takes all of us to make the planet work, and I think that's the message behind the spirit.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.